Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening to all the panelists. Good evening to the attendees and those who I'm sure will be joining us later. I just want to welcome everyone to our first online career session. And to start, I'd like to introduce the principal, Mr. Nigel Joseph, to start us off with a few words. Mr. Joseph.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And I would like, as we often, if not always do, any event, any activity involving our St. Mary's family or community, we invite God's Holy Spirit to be in our midst. So I'll just say a quick prayer and ask God to be present in our session this afternoon. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Almighty God, in everything, you give us the inspiration to make things possible. And in the midst of the many challenges of the coming with the pandemic, you have allowed us, you have allowed members of the community to put together this career seminar, our first online seminar. And with it, the opportunity for persons who may not have been able to be part of it to come on board and to share of their experiences to the benefit of our students, our young charges, as they themselves plot a course forward in their future. We pray, O Lord God, that indeed today's sessions and the remaining sessions for the balance of the week may in fact be successful and may in fact be a seed planting experience for many of those who may come on, who may sign on, and that it will indeed help them in their journey towards a career path and finding something that brings joy and brings success to them and those in their community. We thank you for the panelists. We thank you for all who have signed on. And we thank you for the organizers, O Lord, and pray that in all that we do, we may always give our best and glorify your name. In your name we pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. And good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to our first online Career Day seminar. And I say Career Day, but this is day one of a 3-day seminar, a 3-day program. And it's always good to look at things in a positive vein. Every year, we do put on a Career Day seminar for students of Form 3 as they set about choosing their subjects to go into Form 4, and also for students of Form 6. But it's normally an in-person seminar held in our Centenary Hall on the school compound. With the onset of the pandemic and the lockdown that followed, we've had to, like in many instances, we've had to revisit how we do things rather than cancel, to adjust. And thankfully, with the skill set that abounds in the St. Mary's community, be it with parents, be it with teachers, past students, and even members of our parent-teacher support group, this idea was born, where we said, let us try an online career day and let us reach out to a wider catchment where we can not only limit it to persons in Trinidad, but we can explore persons for the panel that are abroad, and we can also explore persons that may be more challenged in being able to benefit from this exercise. So it is really with a great joy and pride that I'm sharing and presenting or sharing with you all and welcoming everyone to this first time experience, this first time event. And as I look at the panelists, I feel an even greater sense of pride because each and every one of them would have either been a student in my class or at some point in time I would have been their dean. So yes, I am getting old, but it's good to know that as I age, that seeds would have been planted and borne tremendous fruit, so much so that they can now be part of such an event as today and sharing of their experiences and giving advice to others following in their lead as they also pursue their career goals and interests and their dreams and aspirations. So welcome again. I hope that for all who have signed on, there is something or there will be many benefits for you in your career goals. And without much further ado, I hand back to the moderator so that we can get the day's proceedings going. Have a good seminar, everyone. Enjoy, and please, please ask your questions and let it be something that you walk away with, something to benefit you as you go into tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph. Welcome everyone again. I am Mr. Balwant, the current Dean of Form 6 and a member of the Business Department, as you can see there, economics behind me. Today's session is guarded for the business session. So all our panelists are in the field of business, and just a few guidelines before we begin and open up the floor. The attendees, you all can ask questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So you can, as we go along, as the panelists speak, you can ask questions and type in your questions, and we will take those questions in the middle of the 2-hour session. So I'm going to begin with just identifying the panelists. Today we have Mr. Chad Mitchell, private equity investor. Welcome. We have Mr. Chris Boodoosingh, the entrepreneur of Cocoa Republic. Mr. Marc Farrell, entrepreneur of the brand 10 to 1. And Nigel Smith, entrepreneur also of AARP Innovation Labs, which we're about to hear a lot about these gentlemen's career. So welcome again, gentlemen. Very glad to have you with us and sharing your experiences. We want to start with your journey from the CIC days to now. So you can share some of your experiences on that journey, what subjects you did in school at Form 5 into Form 6, and what path you took thereafter. So I open the floor to Marc. Marc, you can begin, and then we just move around the panelists accordingly. So Marc?
Yeah, thanks so much, Mr. Balwant, and great to see all you guys. Pleasure to join, not just my esteemed co-contributors on the panel, but also all of those who are tuning in at home. So really quick background on myself. Obviously, CIC old boy, entered Form 1 back in 1993, which seems like a lifetime ago at this point. I mean, it probably is. I was part of the graduating class of 99, so left Form 6 in 99. Was really kind of science stream throughout most of my time at CIC. So that in and of itself, I think is kind of interesting now sitting on the business panel, but I was a phys chem biology add maths kind of student for CXC, and then for A-levels, I ultimately did phys chem, math, further math, along with GP. So really lived in the science stream, studied engineering at MIT as my first port of call after I left CIC in 99. And then from there, actually started pivoting into the world of business from there. So early career as a management consultant at Bain & Company, did venture capital and private equity with Fidelity in the UK. Went to business school at Harvard from 2008 to 2010, and then really kind of pivoted into the world of entrepreneurship. So from there, I started a sports and media company called Fanline, which I ran for 5 years before moving back into the corporate world. I was an executive at Starbucks for 3 years. I ran the e-commerce business and part of the retail business for the US. And then finally, my most recent stop has been returning to the world of entrepreneurship as the founder of 10 to 1 Rum. So bringing a new elevated premium rum to market here in the US. We've actually just brought a little bit of the product down to Trinidad as well, and trying to tell the story of the Caribbean in a hopefully more authentic and more inspired way here in the US.
Okay. Sounds good. Was there a point in time where the switch took place? Where the switch from the science, because I remember you doing sciences, because you never did econ. So I remember you did the sciences, and all of a sudden afterwards, because I follow you and see you on Facebook all the time, realized that you were switching into the business field. Any particular reason you think that switch or that change took place? Did you work at all in the engineering field at the beginning?
No, only as an intern. So I did my summer internships at BP and at Shell, right? So standard places where you would find a chemical engineer spending time. I did one in Trinidad and then one in New Orleans, you know. if you had asked me probably in Form 1 or Form 2 what I wanted to be or where I wanted to go, I probably would have said in business, right? So I would have had these conversations with my parents way back then. I remember when we were discussing picking subjects for Form 4, I was in 2A, so I went straight to 4. But having that conversation, I actually wanted to do more business. And the advice that I got from my parents at the time was, it is much easier to start in science and engineering and then pivot to business later on. You can get an MBA, you can do those kinds of things. It's harder to start in business and then decide later on you want to go into science, right? And so I always had in the back of my mind that maybe later on I would do something entrepreneurial or go get an MBA. But the grounding of the sciences and the math and stuff that I did in CIC days, I think has actually been super instrumental in the path that I've taken since then, right? You always talk about the value of having a very, very strong analytical platform and foundation for whatever it is you're going to go do, right? I think you'll find a lot of consultants, management consultants, a lot of investors are all from the world of science and engineering, right? So I don't necessarily sit down and like open up books and look at molecules and talk about compounds anymore, but that background does still have some relevance even with what I do today.
That's great. That's great. That's great information for the guys who are actually listening and looking to choose subjects. You know, it's going to be really instrumental. Chad, so let's hear your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Honored to be here, surrounded by former Saints, and I think oftentimes being in the US for a significant portion of time, you can kind of be removed from these stories of being at CIC and diligently doing homework that have created the foundation for you to be doing the kinds of things that you're doing today. And so this has been a really timely and helpful reminder of that. But in giving my background, went to CIC starting, I think, in about 2003, went down the sciences route, but similarly thinking about it as creating a very interesting and solid foundation for entering the business world. And then through CIC was able to get an open scholar that got me funding to go to school in the US. First stop was at Stanford, where I did engineering. From Stanford, I went into investment banking world, and then into private equity world. And then from private equity world, where I was investing in or buying businesses across technology and consumer retail and healthcare, back into Stanford's ecosystem, doing an MBA, where I'm continuing to work for the fund, but also thinking about doing something a little bit more entrepreneurial.
Okay, great. So again, another science background that you think played an instrumental role in you venturing out into the equity world. So you think it had a lot of strength in doing sciences, even though you're now into the business field, as Marc was saying. Yeah?
Definitely, and I'd stress that you can't go wrong in deciding between a business background and a science background at this stage in thinking about going into business later on in life. I think you end up with different foundations. And so for me, coming from the world of sciences, I think that my competitive edge relative to the people that I work around and spend my time with is a really solid analytical foundation. And it allows me to think about solving problems in a slightly different way than someone who perhaps through the social sciences and or business is able to. And so I want to stress that neither path is necessarily better than the other, but ultimately give you different foundations to go into to the world that you want to end up in.
Sure. Thank you very much. And Nigel, your experiences?
So Razat Taz, I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'll share my my background is a little bit, I don't know, different, atypical. And so first of all, I have a very, very, very humble background. So where I grew up has been a from what I've been reading in the last couple of days, a lot of heat happening. I am from East Port of Spain. I grew up on George Street, and I spent 16 years of my life there. And so a lot of my childhood was spent, there was no running water where I grew up. It was like top floor, of a 4-story building. Mm-hmm. So when a lot of my classmates were going home and playing football, I was toting water, that kind of stuff. CIC was a great experience. Had a lot of friends. Form 3, interestingly, I don't think I qualified for the science subjects, so I ended up in business by default. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, when I was planning for this panel, I just remember that just thinking about that inflection point, how that potentially put me on a path for business for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Or if I had done sciences, if I might have been a doctor or something else. So it was really interesting how that was like a real interesting point, for potentially a lot of students.
Yeah.
Back then, the stigma of George Street was, like right now, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy has become a reality, and it's a lot of shooting and everything. But right back then, it wasn't that bad. So my house was actually like a real like hangout spot for a lot of my classmates. So I just remember like it was like we would spend a lot of time. A lot of my classmates would go there after school and everything. So it was actually a real fun experience for me growing up, during the CIC experience. After graduating, I went to the United States, and I had no idea what the future was going to hold. It was one of those, my mom was in Rockland County, New York, and it was, it was like one of those, like the US was one of those places like, pay people, what is the opportunity going to be? I joined there in Rockland County and went to a community college. And I just remember like my first year, it was, it was just like trying to really figure out like what was the path going to really be. And I would say like my entire future could be boiled down to one experience. I was working late one night, and I went to get my bus. It was a 9 o'clock bus, and I got there at 8:58. And the bus driver closed his door and drove off. And I just remember thinking, what am I going to do? I looked up and I saw a sign, and I saw college recruiting fair 5 to 9. I was like, well, I have nothing else to do. So I went down, and folks were breaking down their boots, and I remember seeing a sign for Howard University. And I went and I spoke to the admissions director, and he happened to be from Trinidad. And that just opened up a path to me getting a tuition scholarship to Howard. And that then led to me being at Howard University three months later. And that became my path. It led to what we call this virtuous cycle of one great thing leading to another. Howard was great. I spent 3 years at Howard, interned at KPMG, and then from KPMG, I went to Stanford for my MBA. Interned at Goldman Sachs, went to McKinsey, it's a top strategy consulting firm. After McKinsey, I joined Visa, the credit card association, where I did a variety of strategy and innovation roles. And then from there, I came to AARP, which is one of the biggest nonprofits in the world, 2 billion in revenues, 38 million members. And I've been here for 13 years, and I'm a director in the Innovation Lab group. So my role is to find some of the most disruptive startups in the entire world. So think about like augmented reality and AI and robotics and virtual reality. So startups that are really building these types of disruptive solutions. So I seek them out, I find them, bring them on board, I shape them for an ageless consumer. And then I'm finding, environments to place them in to see if they can help people with better health outcomes. So that's what I do by day. By night, I'm an entrepreneur. I launched a company about 4 years ago. It is, basically took my late grandfather's recipe. He was an amazing mixologist. I wanted to do something that can, it's almost like to pay honor to him, but also to almost create some sort of legacy from George Street as well. So it's a mixer that's called Serena. It's named after my 2 daughters. you know, market could probably do something really phenomenal with your drink. And it really mixes with just about any drink that's out there. So that's been on the market for the last 3 years, and I'm going through that entrepreneurial ride. And I also sit on the board of Tattle and Tattle Life. So those are the many things that I do. So I'm literally living a portfolio life today. So that's been my journey.
Great, sounds great, Nigel. Your story actually most likely mirrors a lot of the current student body that we have, where they, you know, they go through really rough times. We have a lot of boys that go through not so easy times and are having difficulty in making choice of subjects right now. As you said, you may have chosen science, didn't get into it, placed in business. But what I would like the attendees to realize is that I always tell them this in the meeting that we used to have physically, if you don't get the choice of subjects that you initially put, it doesn't mean the end of the world. It means that path, you just have to forge your way down that path. And I think you're showing to be a perfect example of how you can forge your way down that path. And when opportunities present itself, as you said, when you were by the bus shed, you just have to seize the opportunity. So it's great that they can hear this, because every year we get an oversubscription of science. There's an oversubscription of those who want to do science, and not everybody can get to do science. So some are going to be placed in business, and some are going to be placed in modern studies. So thank you very much for your experience. We'll come back to you on other issues. Chris, let's hear your journey.
Yeah, so I mean, my story is pretty similar to, you know, what you've heard here. For the most part, when I was in Form 3 and I was making decisions between science and business, it was a pretty clear route for me that science was what I was better at. So I did choose sciences. I was a little scared of blood, to be quite honest with you. So I purposely didn't do biology, and I took on economics instead. So I had a pretty unique hybrid there. And Mr. Balwant is actually my economics teacher on the side. Yeah, so I did science and econ, and to be quite honest with you, I felt like, you know, science for me was, you know, led a lot of the this chemistry, physics, and the maths, even though it wasn't the basic elements that we learned there. I never really applied those direct elements. I applied those elements all across, you know, every layer of my business life since that day moving forward. So from St. Mary's, I went on to USC. My dad did not want me to do businesses because I wanted to do business in school. So after I did St. Mary's, I wanted to do business. So instead, I had to take engineering because I was forced to, and I adopted finance as a double major in order to fulfill my personal desire with my parents' desire for me to do engineering. My dad being a businessman, he felt, well, there's nothing you could learn in business school that I can't teach you, right? So I'm not saying you're not going to school for business. You could go for science. So that was his attitude. I ended up learning both in university. And right out of USC, I immediately started my entrepreneurial career throwing events. So here I am. I started with sciences, physics, chem, art, maths, and I learned about finance. And now I'm throwing events. I'm throwing parties, you know, in places like Cruising and, you know, O2 Park and all of these various venues in Trinidad, right? And, you know, those events started to grow, and eventually I had events that had 2,000, 3,000. I brought Damian Marley, brought Sean Paul, brought Diplo, brought Ray Schroeder and Russian. I mean, almost a dozen artists, over maybe 20 artists plus over the years that I did events. And the one thing about the event industry is that, so I immediately entered as an entrepreneur. I never had a job. I never really had that lifestyle where, you know, I was just kind of moving with the flow, you know, and some events did very well, some events didn't do so well. And I remember doing an event as a DJ Snake Popcorn. That was my last event, right? This was like 5 years ago. Yeah, I remember telling myself, you know what? I want to do something very sustainable that is not as volatile as these events, because the event is as fragile as the weather. You know, I mean, tomorrow it can rain and your whole decision to go to my event can change, you know? So I decided, one of my earliest ideas, and I had this idea since I was in St. Mary's, and I wanted to do it straight out of college, but you know, I couldn't get funding. I wanted to make chocolate. All my life, I heard that Trinidad and Tobago had the best cocoa beans in the world. And I did a lot of research into that while I was in college, and I realized that was true. You know, so, and I can tell you right now, now that I'm involved in chocolate, that I use the knowledge that I gained in sciences, you know, on a daily basis. You know, I mean, like I'm literally reconstructing, you know, chemical compositions of fats to recreate products. So, I mean, I would say that the elementary information you get on sciences is especially because you're in an environment where it's rigid and structured, and how you learn it, it's kind of spoon-fed to you, because knowledge is decentralized right now. You can learn anything on YouTube. So anything you want to learn, you will eventually learn when you want to learn it. But at least you have a teacher that you can raise your hand and say, Miss, why does, you know, H2O turn into H3O minus, and, you know, why does that happen? And you can get that answer on the spot. And you have that advice, or that can kind of guide you across. Whereas I feel like, you know, businesses, you will, as you get older in life, you can always, you know, just Google whatever question you want. You know, what is EBITDA? What is this? What is that? How does this work? You can Google a lot of those things along the way, but having that expert along, kind of like training wheels, is going to be very helpful, I feel, when making those, if you can get into the science courses. That's my honest opinion.
So yeah, thanks again, Chris. Just for in case anybody doesn't know, your brand of chocolate is Cocoa Bean.
Cocoa Republic.
Cocoa
Republic.
Cocoa Republic. Yeah. So I'm talking about the aspect of the Cocoa Republic in terms of the export market, as we were saying. What your views there on the export market for Trinidad cocoa and for your particular product?
What did you ask?
The export market.
Yeah.
What you're seeing as the potential for the export market, knowing that we have some of the best cocoa or the best cocoa bean.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Trinidad has the opportunity here to position itself in the chocolate industry that, you know, we can't do with many other of our other industries. We have the ability to be positioned as like the Champagne, you know, growing region of cocoa relative to the rest of the world's cocoa, right? And now when you create value to that and you turn that into chocolate bars, you know, your brand can be like the Mercedes or like the Porsche within this world. And you don't really have, you know, you inherited that as a Trinidadian citizen. That is, you know, part of your legacy. That is part of your inheritance, you know, from the state, from the government, from the British Empire. They did all that genetic work creating the best, finest strains that we get to inherit. And we get to drive to Sangre Grande and go and pick random cocoa pods. I know y'all like to suck the little whiting on the inside, but you know, those beans, once fermented, turn into some very special beans. So, and we inherited that. So I feel like Trinidad has the ability to really scale our current position as a country in the chocolate sector. To be honest with you, Mr. Balwant, I'm actually hyper-focusing on a very small sector within chocolate. It's the cannabis chocolate industry. So as you know, cannabis went legal in America. Yeah. And brands, not as Prohibition 2.0, so the Cirocs and the Absolutes and the Hennessy's and the Heinekens are getting created right now. So we have created a brand called Irie Chocolate. And Irie Chocolate is positioned to be like the Ciroc of edibles within California. So that's where most of our California export goes, to that particular brand. But at retail, above, our chocolate sells at $25 US. So I can tell you a bag of cocoa beans, which costs $500 US, turns into 10,000 US on an invoice for me when I add all the value. I mean, obviously I have to add a lot of other inputs. There's labor and packaging and all that stuff. But the raw material of cocoa beans does a 20x value creation when it's sold as a cannabis product.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Chris. Really interesting stories from everybody, especially with regards to the choice of subjects, which of course is one of the main focus, and for our Form 6 students who are on board here this evening, to look at where they can find themselves in 2 to 3, 4, 5 years. Another aspect of your experiences that we'd like to hear is, for each one of you all can share, is we'd like you to paint a picture of us, for us, paint a picture for us of a day in the life of each one of you. So what does a day from beginning to end look like in the life of Chad? Chad, you can start with Chad. What paints a picture for us of a day in the life of Chad Mitchell?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's tough to synthesize and distill what a typical day looks like, but I'll try to paint a story around who I interact with and what I do. So I, as it can most simply be put, find businesses, so anyone engaging in commerce, and I attempt to buy that business. So to put it into the context of Trinidad and maybe some of the names that people know very well, it would be like Chris's business, which is a chocolate business that is generating some amount of revenue and some amount of profit that I'm interested in owning, and that theoretically Chris is no longer interested in being the main owner of. And what I do day to day is I jump on the phone and I have conversations with the owners of businesses to figure out how we might engage in that type of a transaction. So at what price they'd like to sell their business and in what time frame, and I think most importantly, what it would look like for me to operate that business once it's been acquired or purchased. And then if we kind of get aligned on all of those questions, then the transaction takes place and the business has a completely new owner.
Okay, good. Nigel, what does a day in the life of your career look like?
It's incredibly insane, and it feels like I get busier as life goes on. So I mean, let's say today, started at 9 o'clock. It was a team, just like an all team gathering, and it was just, you know, making sure that it was a huddle, just making sure that we were just aware of what everyone is really focusing on, and what we've been doing as well as a team is just, it's kind of touchy-feely-ish, but making sure that we're all in a good emotional spot with regards to COVID-19 and the social unrest that's happening within the US. I had a couple of touch points with the CEOs of my startups, just to make sure that they're happy with the services we are providing, and just to troubleshoot as well, you know, a couple of issues. I try to coach them as well, you know, just from, you know, some of the decisions they're making strategically, and just making sure that they're also from being business ready as well. So there's a lot of coaching that's involved with the startups and handholding. So that's a big part of what I do. I had a business development meeting with a big potential client. So again, what I try to do is find the environments where I can place my startups so that they can be tested for clinical efficacy. So I had a meeting with a senior person within one of these potential organizations, just to introduce the concept of, here are some startups we can bring to your organization, and here's what the benefits that this can lead to. So that went really well, and it's leading to a follow-up discussion with his leadership team. Then I'm having this discussion with you guys right now.
Yeah.
And then once a day is done, that's when my entrepreneurial responsibilities begin. I am going to follow up with my team. We're going to do some launches on our social platform. So there's, you know, that's when like part 2 begins. And then, you know, of course I have to spend time with my kids because they're 8 and they're 12 and they want daddy time. And I need to figure out what I'm getting my wife for our wedding anniversary on July 5th. Otherwise, I'm in big trouble. So there's all that pressure as well. So life is busy. I'm constantly juggling a lot of balls, but it's, you know, I wouldn't trade anything in the world. So
great. What I was reading up on the bio for AARP. What do you mean by the hatchery?
So the hatchery, and here to my hatch.
Yeah.
So the hatchery is the name of our innovation lab space. So it's a 10,000 square foot lab space that's adjacent to our headquarters. And within the hatchery is where we have our product development team, as well as our design team. And, you know, it's where we host a lot of startups, and, you know, we host a lot of events as well. Yeah.
Okay. Before I move on to Chris, I just want the attendees to remember that you can start shooting your questions. We will look at it we will start looking at it after Chris provides his day, what the day in the life of Chris Boodoosingh looks like.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. So a typical day for me, I mean, I woke up this morning, I went straight to the factory, looked at some orders that were getting created for our export next week. You know, I was on the phone with some farmers talking about, you know, how crops looking coming in over the next couple of months. Tomorrow I have to go on a private yacht with one of the largest farm owners. He has like 1,000-acre farm. So he's like, come down the islands with me. So my day starts with, you know, so I have no 2 days are like, you know, every day, like up to like last night. This is my day yesterday. I'll show you a nice little video. I don't know if So me and my daughter making prototypes. She's helping me. She's helping me.
You are my elf. I think Santa Claus make a chocolate elf. You are.
So that's me prototyping a new Milo that we just did, right? So we're releasing that in 2 weeks. So you're gonna see some powdered beverages that Cocoa Republic's releasing. All of our products are vegan, right? So we find substitutes to create milk-like texture and recipes, you know. So yeah, yesterday was prototyping. Today was this factory. Tomorrow it's client relationship, supplier relationship management. You know, every day, no 2 days are like for me. I just kind of do what's the next biggest problem. You know, don't tell me what was working, tell me what was broken. And I wake up every day trying to fix that. So
Good. Nice to hear. Brevard, in terms of the questions on that you want to pass on the questions now?
Yeah, sure. Well, we do have a couple questions. One from Michael. Would you recommend getting into electronics such as retail laptops, phones, and desktops in Trinidad? I'm not sure if there are any panelists would actually care to take that on, because that's a question from Michael.
I think cell phone repairs is going to be a massive industry. You know, think about cell phones. Think about Apple being one of the largest companies in the world right now. The fact is, every single person has a cell phone, and statistically speaking, you know, it's getting damaged, wet, or broken every month or 2 or 3 or whatever. So that is an industry that someone who has a profession like that is going to be always have work. You know, that's like the next modern day plumber, right? It's just like an advanced version of the plumber, right? So he's always going to have work. And to be quite honest, and I told Mr. Balwant this right before we got on this call, I'm looking for IT professionals. I want people who can growth hack Amazon. So look for, you know, start looking at avenues where you can start developing skills that cater to the new world, not the old world. What does the new world look like? And what are the new problems going to be? And try and be in a position to be able to fix those future problems. You know, then future problems might look like problems with solar, not problems with physical turbines. You know, I'm just saying, I'm not, you know, agriculture is always a problem. So agrotech is always going to be something that's advancing. And it doesn't have to be sophisticated. It could be just like, you know, just learning how to grow indoor. I think agriculture is a huge thing. Like, I think there's so much ways we can optimize agriculture. So anybody who's interested in agriculture, that's something we're learning. I wish you guys had an agriculture class in St. Mary's, by the way. Mr. Balwant, you could probably look into that.
Yeah, okay. Yes, you will. Brevard?
Well, we also had another question from Shelley, directed to Chad. Specifically, Chad, when you buy a business, do you run it and flip it, as in you rebrand and resell?
That's a really good question. I think that to answer it may be helpful to talk about the types of investing or purchasing that I've done historically. So I think the two main styles that people have are finding an incredible entrepreneur with a really quickly growing business into a very exciting opportunity and buying a minority ownership in that business so that you can partner alongside that entrepreneur as they continue to scale. And I think that to the extent that you feel like you can find the entrepreneur and you can find alignment between entrepreneur and opportunity at the right price, then that can be an incredible way to do business. And I've done that before and continue to do it. The second bucket is around finding a business that you'd like to own entirely. And to your question, you can decide if you want to own it outright and rebrand it and flip it. But you might also decide that you want to own that business into perpetuity. And what I've done historically is buy businesses and sort of fix them and then flip them. What I plan on doing, hopefully for the rest of my life, is buying businesses that you'd like to own into perpetuity, because I think that when you are buying a business in that philosophy, you ultimately treat it in exactly the right way. You think about your employees and your customers and your suppliers as though you're building a relationship into perpetuity, and I think you make better decisions then for the business that you own.
I think.
Awesome. I have, well, there's another question from Abdullah to Chris. What country does the cocoa beans for your chocolate come from? Other than Trinidad, in your opinion, who produces the best cocoa?
Well, all our cocoa comes from Trinidad. We exclusively use Trinidad right now. And to be quite honest with you, Trinidad really has the legacy and the I guess the credentials to really call itself the finest cocoa in the world, because the finest varieties were developed on this island. Now, even though the varieties were shared, because, you know, Jamaica was a colony of England at the time that these varieties were created. So Jamaica grows very similar genetic varieties to Trinidad, so does Grenada. We pioneered that, and there are a lot of varieties that are not shared. So think about the Julie mango, right? The Julie mango only grows in Trinidad, right? Starch mango and cutlass mango and all those other ones grow on all the other islands. But we have the Julie, and only Trinidad grows Julie mangoes. That is regarding cocoa, because we didn't share those genetics yet. Those genetics are only here. And the same thing can be said about wine and other agriculture products. Genetics matters a lot more than terroir, right? And we are preserving some genetics in something called the Cocoa Research Center, which is in a part of UE. So if you go down to UE, you'll see the Cocoa Research Center, and you could talk to the professors there about, you know, cocoa and all that kind of stuff.
I think you have one more.
Where? What?
Well, I think one of the questions was, I think we didn't hear Marc's day in the life of. So we do want to hear Marc's rundown of, and help him paint a picture of the day in the life of Marc Farrell.
the very exciting day in the life of Marc Farrell, yeah. Like, I'm happy to answer that question. Actually, and I'll answer it. But before I do it, let me just piggyback on something that Chris said a second ago, which is I love his line of thinking and expression about you know really focusing on Trinidadian cocoa and the product that we have, and the fact that we have something that he believes, right, could be the best in the world. And actually, for a second, it doesn't even really matter. And I by the way, Chris, I believe you too, and we should talk about some rum and chocolate collaborations as well. But it almost doesn't even matter whether that's true or not. I think like getting ourselves as a people to a place where we are starting to identify things that we believe we can be the best in the world at is the kind of mindset we need to be instilling in all Saints men, right? It doesn't matter whether you're in Form 1 or Form 6 as a part of the Zoom. I think that point is super, super critical. And whether you're thinking about that as like competitive advantage in a particular product, Yeah, it might be cocoa, it might be rum, it might be, you know, any host of a number of things. It might be in the creative space, it might be in entertainment. We have to start to think about like Trinidad is such a unique place in terms of like the marriage of natural resources that we have, the unique infrastructure, the combination of the people, the things that we've taken to a world stage. So if you're sitting down and listening to the Zoom right now and you're in Form 3 or Form 4, start thinking about it. And by the way, there are things that you guys are seeing that we certainly are not seeing. I'm 37 years old now, so I'm an old man. Your parents not seeing it either, right? But like the opportunities are definitely there. So make that part of your own mission. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on that quickly, because it'll actually dovetail into sort of my daily life as an entrepreneur, right? I mean, like the other guys said, there are no 2 days that are similar. But with that in mind, I actually try to make the start of my day follow a little bit of a routine. So the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I try to learn one thing new or absorb one thing new, right? So I might still be lying in my bed, to be honest, tired from the day before, but I'll throw on a little podcast. I might listen to the New York Times daily. I might listen to a podcast on investing or on the latest on the political landscape, or give myself a chance to like inject one thing new into my day for sure. Next thing I try to do almost every day is kind of like get my objectives for the day in order. And I'm still, for all the technology we have, I'm still a pen and paper guy a lot of times. I sit down with a pad, a sheet of paper, something like this that I have right here. And I will just sit down and kind of make a note of, all right, like for the thousands of things that are running through my mind as an entrepreneur, what are some of the mission critical things that I want to get done in that particular day, right? That's a fairly consistent habit that I have each and every day. From there, you know, the day sort of heads off in a number of different directions, right? Because again, by definition of being an entrepreneur, it means you're being presented with a whole host of different challenges and opportunities every day. But if you're running a business, right, you could think about that through like specific lines of or specific functional areas. So some days I might be focused more on marketing and creative. How am I telling the story of 10 to 1 rum? What markets are we trying to go into? What are our core taglines? Who are the key ambassadors for the product? Some days I'm focused more on creative or on product development. For product development for rum might look like a new line or a new SKU we're going to introduce. It might be cocktail development that you want to introduce to market. It might be collaborations with somebody like a Chris or a Nigel based on what they have going on. The guts of the business, super important. So I kind of cover a little bit of time to the operational side. So where are we on inventory? Where are we on production needs, raw materials that go into the creation of the rum or the product? Back to the business element here, managing your finance and your books. So I'm looking, not every day, but you're certainly looking at your monthly burn. How much cash am I spending, right? Can I meet payroll next month or can I not? What are some key areas I want to invest in? And so really kind of like checking off those functional areas as an entrepreneur is how I tend to tackle my day. The afternoons, I will tend to do other things like I'm often doing interviews with press, telling the story of the brand. If you're the founder of a business like this, you have to play the role of chief evangelist a lot. And so a lot of that kind of tends to occupy my afternoons. And then evenings, you know, I think maybe one of the nicer parts of again, like sort of running a rum company is you're spending just time interacting with people. If you're an extrovert, right? You're out in the market, you're out at restaurants, you're at bars, you're talking to bartenders, you're talking to patrons, you're kind of building the business that way, right? It very much is a roll up your sleeves business in terms of account by account, city by city, in addition to all of the press and the headlines and stuff that you want to get as well. So that's kind of how I would break down my daily life across those different elements of entrepreneurial activity.
I just want to quickly follow up on Marc's comment that was piggybacked on Chris's comment. You'd be surprised how far your pride flows. I mean, in my apartment in New York, there's a bottle of 10 to 1 that was a gift from a friend named Ryan Percy, who's also a Saints man.
Oh, that's
There probably still a couple boxes of Cocoa Republic from Chris. Whether they're empty because we've eaten all of them out, doesn't matter. The fact is it's on the desk, and anytime somebody comes over to my house for dinner, they see those two brands. And for a country of 1 million people, I couldn't tell you the number of times I meet people who tell me that they know a Trinidadian. And even within the Trinidadian ecosystem, know a Saints man. So So just want to reiterate what Mark said and what Chris has been saying about just take pride in your country, take pride in being a saints man. It goes really far.
Yeah. I mean, Chad is the one that actually taught me this one lesson. What is your unfair competitive advantage? When you are starting a business, identify that moat, that protection that you have that no one can invade. Well, it's fairly difficult. A lot of resources are required to invade. And like what Mark is doing with the rum, he's coming with the Caribbean identity, which is pretty hard for a European to come with a rum that has an identity, that has any kind of legacy, right? Or it's similar to what I'm doing with chocolate is, you're using your unfair competitive advantages to your advantage, which is why, setting up hotels on the beach makes sense in the Caribbean, because we have nice, pretty beaches, right? You won't do that if you was located in Russia. They have beaches too, but it's just not pretty. So, use what's your advantage, identify, and your advantage changes because it's not just Trinidadian advantages, your family advantages, your native advantages that you learn from your relatives. You might have had an uncle that was into something that you learned about. So there's something that that's inherent to you that, you have an advantage over other people. Like, use those things. Look around and look at the hand that you have and what hand can you make with that? And that's going to change by person. So I won't say everybody should pick a direction. Like sciences, businesses, or any of that. Look at your hand. Your hand is different. Your hand is always going to be changing as well. So, I thought I wanted to be a businessman that was going to be in tech. Look at me now, I'm manufacturing chocolate. So the reality of the situation is, sometimes you might be headed in one direction. And guess what? I dropped out of computer science in St. Mary's, and then I became a self-taught programmer because I needed to learn that coding afterwards. So the reality situation is, what you think you're going to do in life is probably not what you're going to end up doing. I know doctors that became lawyers, and I know lawyers that became businessmen, So the key is, and like Mark said, I think the key is also to keep an open mind to always learning. It doesn't matter. It could be, right now I'm learning to grow indoor strawberries. I mean, that just happens to be a little hobby of mine, indoor agriculture, because I believe Trinidad is suitable due to our energy. Once again, our unfair competitive advantage. We have the cheapest energy costs. But the point is, I'm always learning, and maybe 3-4 months from now, it could be Spanish. And then 3-4 months from now, it could be some other skill set, it could be learning to row a boat. I don't know. But keep that idea open that learning is not only restricted to school. Learning is a part of life that school just kind of builds the habit that you keep for the rest of your life,
So let me build on that. One thing that I think is real important is that leave CIC with confidence. You're getting not just an amazing education, but you're getting like habits. You're getting it's not just like the fish, but how to fish. It's when I went to the US, school for the first couple of years was a breeze. It was just like, it was such an easy transition for me because I felt like I had such an amazing foundation, coming from St. Mary's. And it just felt like the fundamentals was there, but the transition for me, just coming from that, the background, the backdrop of St. Mary's College was amazing. And the support structures, I had night school with Mr. Raja. There were certain things that was just there that it just kind of instilled in me the discipline of studying late, getting ready, getting prepared, and you kind of just leave with that confidence, knowing that you're just so much better prepared than most to just be successful in the world. So that's one point. The second thing, and this is a little bit shared, a little bit of my AARP knowledge. So some pre-COVID facts, right? We were looking at an aging revolution. I don't know how COVID has impacted this, but at least in the United States, 10,000 people a day were turning 65. Fastest growing age demographic, people over 85, second fastest people over 100. If you were 10, you had a 1 in 2 chance of living till 104. Again, I'm not sure how COVID may have impacted these numbers, but the whole point is at least in the US, people were projected to live really long, right? And I'm sure there are probably similar numbers in Trinidad or around the world. The whole point is you think about a long life, plan for a long life, which means give yourself permission to fail, give yourself permission to try different things, give yourself permission to pursue your passions. And, you know, if you do something and you don't like it, try something else. I remember I wanted to do investment banking so freaking bad. I wanted to do banking. I wanted to go on Wall Street. I got to Goldman Sachs, and it was just like 20 hours a day. And I was like, this just isn't for me. And I did something else, you know. Don't beat yourself over the head. Do it, try it. If it's not for you, as you said, you know, if it's not strawberries, it could be blueberries, it could be something else. So experiment with life. You have a lot of time ahead of you.
Important words from these guys, because these are things that we preach in classes and in school and various lectures, and it's glad to, I'm appreciating the fact that it's coming from you guys who are successful and out there, and I'm hoping that the attendees and everybody could hear it and take it and walk away with it, that the lessons that you all are talking about are real. And it's what we want them to get out of this session. So I'm really, really glad for the words that you all just expressed there. And it really was leading us into the next section that we were planning to do, but you touched on some of the ideas, which would have been, what are some general tips that you would give to students who are on the verge of selecting subjects into Form 4? And I know some of you all touched on it, but if anybody would like to jump into it even further, because many of them, as I think Chris said, many of them do not know what they want to do. Not too clear, as you probably were at that age. Not too clear on what they want to do, on deliberating very heavily on choosing these subjects. Are there any tips that you think you can just throw out based on your own experience and where you've reached to the parents and the guys who are selecting subjects in the next week or two they have to select?
You know what? Just pick something that you really love, because honestly, don't let anybody influence you on what you should do. Because if you really love it, honest to God, you'll put your heart and soul into it, and you'll find your own ways of growing, and you will learn what you need to learn as you need to learn it along life, right? You don't let somebody tell you need to know this. You need to learn maths. You need to learn, you know, econ. You need to learn computer science. All of those subjects have been forced on me, right? And the reality situation, you will learn what you need to learn through life. But if you really like something and you want to learn that, you'll find your opportunities within that space, right? Don't pick something because relatives, which is usually a big factor at your age. Relatives are telling you, do this, do this, do that. No, if you don't like that, don't do it, Fred. Honestly, you will learn what you need to learn later on.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with Chris there, right? I mean, I think the single most critical ingredient at any stage in your life, whether you're in Form 3, Form 6, or beyond, is going to be about passion, right? So, you know, find anything that you love the most. And by the way, you can reserve the right to change that choice later on. If you ask me what I wanted to be 20 years ago, if you ask me what I wanted to be 5 years ago, by the way, the answer was probably a little bit different, right? And it's going to change and evolve over time. But you find it in everything, right? Pick your favorite football player, pick your favorite musician, pick your favorite entrepreneur, your favorite activist. The thing that they all have in common is passion, right? So if any parents are tuning in right now, certainly if any students are listening in, I would kind of rank order with that first. And then I think, yeah, I mean, do have a conversation with your parents and your relatives. You know, they may see things in you that you haven't seen in yourself, right? I mean, we're not going to discount the experience of those who might have been on earth a little bit longer than us. And so I would take those things into account, but certainly kind of with passion as that primary anchor. And the one other thing that I would say is actually all three of Chris, Chad, and Nigel kind of mentioned this in varying ways, right? But just to sort of strike the balance between finding value in the subject matter versus exploring practical opportunities that might exist outside of like the schoolyard, right? I don't think what we are saying, at least not what I am saying, is, well, forget the subjects and forget the school because everything else will come outside of the walls of CIC, right? I mean, that's actually not the advice that I at least would want to impart. What I would say is use that grounding and use that foundation that you have, right, to start developing some of those interests outside, to start asking some of those questions outside. I like again, Chris's example with the chocolate, right? Which is like, all right, you know, I might be looking at a chemistry book right now and just seeing a bunch of C's and H's and O's sitting on a piece of paper, right? Like what does it actually mean to me? All right, well, if I have an interest in maybe I want to make a little chocolate or I had a little side hustle, or I'm trying to figure out, like, somebody asked a question before about getting into hardware and cell phones and laptops, right? Electronics, electrical engineering, the basics of physics. Like, start taking some of that subject, let it jump off of the page and use your imagination, use your points of passion, right? To start shining a light on where you might ultimately head once your time sort of walking the walls of CIC has come and gone.
So let me jump in with 3 different responses, and they might all clash, so bear with me. So one, just from a pure pragmatic perspective, I see, at least from within Trinidad, I think there's an opportunity for data, right? Any pathways, any opportunities for data capture, you know, any cool tech that could be created where you can amass amount of data on individuals, any cool innovators that can come up with something really cool. That would be to me, if I was trying to create a path for that, whatever subjects can get me to that would be amazing, right? So, and I'm not sure if that's business or science or whatever the combination is, but that's kind of one thing I'll just throw out. The second is echoing passion, but I'll just qualify it by saying this. By the time you guys get to my age, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm old, I have to qualify that I'm not old yet, but all the jobs that are existing right there are probably gonna change. You know, everyone is projecting that AI is gonna replace a lot of job functions. I mean, post-COVID, you're probably gonna see a lot of jobs being reimagined. Think about it, we have this Zoom call right now, which probably would not have happened if COVID didn't happen, right? So you're gonna see a lot of reimagining happening in this world going forward, and there's just gonna be an opportunity to rethink and reshape and just do things in a different way. So follow your passion and create new value in any different way that you see fit. And whatever your subjects are, leverage that to your best advantage. So again, if you're excited about the businesses or the sciences or econ or whatever it may be, use that to get you to where you need to get to, right? And then the last thing I'll just put out there, for whatever it's worth, I do think that as you progress through life, the way that we think about success evolves. You know, I think, you know, early on in life, I think there is a bit of a narrow version of success, at least for me, you know, so I'll speak very singularly as Nigel, but, you know, it was almost like it was more of a financial success and, you know, like accomplishing certain things. And I think for me, as I've progressed through this world, it's more of a, how can I have an impact in this world? You know, so I've been blessed in life to have traveled around the world. You know, I've been to every single continent. And one thing I've noticed everywhere, pick, you know, Europe, Asia, Africa, whatever, Japan, I have seen shrines of Bob Marley everywhere where they're singing One Love, and he died when he was 36, right? And he's had so much impact in the world. He's gotten his message, his music, he stayed, you know, he was pure. And to me, there's something that was really, really powerful about what his success has been. And to me, it wasn't financial success. It was just like his ability to just influence people with his message, right? So, you know, so I think, you know, thinking about ultimately what success means for you should drive what you choose and what that path should ultimately mean. And once you define what life success is, then that should really define everything that you do, including what subjects you pick. So hopefully that helps.
Sure.
Yeah, I would strongly echo all of what was said by everyone involved. Only thing to add on my end is we spent a lot of time asking what we should choose between, when in reality, we usually know the answer ourselves. So like in your mind, you kind of have a sense of if you have a bias to or against business versus science. And we spend too little time asking, how can I be most successful on the path that I've chosen for myself? And so if we fast forward to when you all have made your decisions and you ultimately have a sense of if you're going down the business or science path, I think what you really want to be asking people who you trust is, how do I engage with my teachers at school? How do I engage in my homework? How do I engage in all these other areas of my life to guarantee success down the path I've chosen for myself? So echo everything everyone else has said, but would encourage you all to think a lot more about how to make the path you want for yourself or like for yourself as fruitful as possible as you put time into deciding between the two.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. Brevard, we have some questions I think we want to just pose before we move on to that last segment.
Sure, yeah. We do have a few questions. One question from Marissa: what are the main components or traits needed to be a successful entrepreneur? Because the entrepreneurs on the panel, much everyone.
Failure is an incredibly important ingredient in being a successful entrepreneur. You learn a lot more from failure than you do from success. Success actually breeds arrogance. If you get success after success after success, you start thinking, you know, everything you're going to touch is going to turn to gold. And you stop realizing that you have limitations. So I feel every failure has drawn a line for me where my limitations are. And you know, it's only a failure when you give up, right? So if you're still working on something 10 years later, you haven't failed. You know, you only fail when you give up. So I can safely say that I failed at everything that I gave up on. I didn't have partial successes. I failed if I gave up on them, right? And to this date, what is currently operating is my ongoing ventures. Because companies are like people, they don't live forever. You know, the longest company is lucky if they get to 100 years, lucky, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, whenever, keep this in mind whenever you read an article about somebody or you see their story on TV or whatever the case is, right? History is always revisionist, right? So it's always rewritten to kind of amplify the great and leave out the challenges, right? And the stories are always very selective. So, I mean, to echo what Chris said, I'm sure there are few, if any, entrepreneurs out there who haven't sort of swallowed a bitter pill or two when it comes to failure. I mean, again, I was just gonna share in my own context, the startup that I had right out of business school, you know, loved building the business, loved building the brand. It was in the sports and media space, like I mentioned. I always tell people, I worked harder on that one business than I've worked on everything else in my life combined. CIC, MIT, Harvard, everything else. And it didn't work, right? And a lot of people try to sugarcoat the outcomes of businesses. Well, you know, I didn't quite have the exit I intended, or you spin some story as to what ultimately became of it. It did not work, quite frankly, right? And up until that point, was lucky to have a track record of a lot of very successful steps along the way, and that was super, super hard to deal with, right? But it has steeled me in a way that I, you know, would take a couple hours to fully sort of articulate and express. But I think kind of once you've sort of seen the bottom of the abyss and you kind of have a better sense of what failure looks like and feels like, it gives you a different sense of courage as an entrepreneur, right? Like when I wake up in the morning now, I have no fear of failure. Not because I'm not conscious of the fact that what I'm doing might fail. I'm just not afraid of it, right? And so my approach to that world is just very, very different now. So I think ingredients for success, well, not ingredients for success as an entrepreneur, but ingredients to go tackle the world of entrepreneurship. I think embracing and acknowledging that sort of path of failure, it makes a massive difference. And then I would kind of add to that, really sort of like a general curiosity and a desire to build and to contribute, right? I mean, by definition, an entrepreneur is someone who sees a gap in a market somewhere, right? Well, I see that they've always done it like this, but what if I did it like this instead? What if I told the story this way? What if I painted it red instead of blue, right? I mean, that on a very fundamental level is what you're doing as an entrepreneur. So I think you have to be very willing to go out there and challenge the status quo, challenge very established, long-held beliefs and assumptions. Because if it's obvious, it would already exist. If it were easy to do, it would also already exist, right? So that's the road that you're about to walk down when you become an entrepreneur. And I think that is an equally critical ingredient.
So let me jump in. So I would say 4 things, so for me, just looking at it as from the AARP Innovation Lab side, where we are basically investing in and bringing startups on board. You know, a lot of times it is really, we're looking at the person, and we're also looking at the opportunity as well. So it's kind of really 2 things. So one, it's you know, it's passion and influence, right? So, you know, how much passion is that person bringing to the table, and the influence, the ability to convey that vision in a really compelling way, and really get people on board with what they're seeing, that everyone gets excited, right? Agility is really important. You know, I think every startup that's out there should have had some sort of, you know, rethink of their business model when COVID happened, potentially rethought their business model with the social unrest that's happening. It's like, whenever there's anything that's, any externality, anything major happening in the economy, like, how are you stopping, rethinking, pivoting, adjusting as needed, and just being able to be as, you know, to be agile, because that's what you do. And honestly, big businesses need to be agile as well, not just startups. And then business acumen is just a really big thing when you're dealing with big organizations, being responsive, because a lot of big deals, and, you know, I see potentially falling through the cracks when just folks are not responsive and, you know, picking the wrong fights and so forth. But to me, those are like the 4 big things I've seen for entrepreneurs in success.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. And just consistency. If you work really hard at anything, eventually you will get somewhere. You may not get where you want to go or you thought you wanted to go, but if you keep working hard, the consistency will pay out. I've seen it, you know? So that's important as well.
Any more questions we take in, Brevard?
Sure, yeah, there's another question, and Nigel kind of alluded to it. One question is, how has COVID affected your business? Have you had to change your business model as a result? I'm sure pretty much all business owners, entrepreneurs have had to think through during this pandemic, how you need to pivot or adjust. So what about you and your business? What have you had to do?
Yeah, I'm sure everybody has answered that one. I'll answer. I'll jump in for 10 to 1. You know, the short answer is yes, absolutely. When you are a young spirits brand, right? So you're not Grey Goose or Tito's or Bacardi in the US, or even if you're Angostura in Trinidad. 85-90% of your volume comes from bars, restaurants, hotels, right? So if those close, then a bunch of your volume suddenly goes away, literally overnight, right? Like somebody just stopped the wheel and put it on pause. So that was a major moment for us. And as we were kind of all talking about before with regards to like the value of that entrepreneurial experience, I think my approach to that was just very different than maybe it would have been 5 years ago, because literally the only thing that I saw was opportunity, right? There's no panic. Let's just figure out, well, all right, what do we do instead, right? And so what it has done is it's actually given us an opportunity to go build new channels of growth that I wouldn't have had time to pursue if I was on the everyday treadmill of bars and restaurants and hotels and trade and all of that stuff. So what have we done in the last 3 months? We've spun up e-commerce for 10 to 1, which is very difficult to do in spirits because of all the regulation, but we got a V1 up in a couple of weeks. We're launching V2 next week, which allows us to deliver to all 50 states in the US. We've pursued a lot of partnerships. I think partnerships can be a very interesting approach in this world to kind of drive new volume for the business. So I'm always looking out there like, yo, who can I find or who can I identify that I can sort of introduce 10 to 1 to, that will help them to kind of bring it to a new audience. And we've had actually, I think, a lot of very encouraging success in that realm. And number 3 is what we're doing right now, this world of Zoom. So I'm saying to myself, okay, you know, people aren't going back to the office for the foreseeable future. This Zoom thing is here to stay. Actually, I've had a couple of funny sidebar conversations with my dad about this Zoom thing. But whereas people used to do happy hours going to a bar 3 or 4 months ago, if I said to you all, yo, let's get together and do a virtual happy hour, 6 months ago you'd have looked at me a little sideways, right? Like that's not something I'm interested in, not an idea I want to pursue, but not as what people are doing. So we've actually been spinning up this whole machine of doing virtual happy hours and cocktail classes and tastings and stuff to bring 10 to 1 into your living room, right? And people are much more willing to do that today than they were 6 months ago, 12 months ago. And all 3 of those things that I just mentioned, by the way, just to kind of point out, are not transient things, right? So you're not saying, all right, well, one channel has closed to me, let me figure out what I can do just to kind of triage and pass the time for the next 3 months. Those are all things that will have permanence, right? E-commerce, here to stay. Partnerships certainly can be here to stay. And then this new virtual universe that we have, here to stay. So you use that as an opportunity, right? COVID is the ultimate version of life has given you some lemons, right? Try to figure out how you can make some lemonade out of that. And that's certainly been our approach.
Hey, that's my line. You're stealing my lemonade line.
Sorry, Nigel, you can't have all the quotables. You know, I have one or two.
So let me give two quick examples. So as in the United States, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but there's been real disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on Black and Brown populations, and African Americans have been especially hard hit. So they've been 5 times more likely to be hospitalized, and fatalities have been 2.3 times more likely to have had a fatality. So we've accelerated doing some clinical studies. We're taking some high-tech solutions like robotic devices, putting it into marginalized communities, so medically underserved communities in DC. So it's a big partnership with Howard University, and to really test clinical efficacy, to see if that can really help with clinical outcomes. And if it works, that can potentially be scaled up, and really helping folks who have diabetes manage their diabetes levels better and so forth. So this is something that I'm not sure if it's ever been done. So we are kind of really ahead of the curve in trying to do something like this within the US. So that's one thing that's live, that's happening right now. From a Zarina perspective, this was the year for me to get my product on like cruise ships and everything. So it was like a whole B2B strategy that we've had to be agile and do that whole repivoting. So we've shifted focus to e-commerce, and an interesting opportunity happened. The laws have changed so that restaurants and bars can now actually deliver cocktails to folks at home in pouches. And so my product is actually an easy mixer. So we've actually been targeting restaurants that they have actually let go of their craft bartenders, and now they need a simple mixer that they can easily mix cocktails and send it home. So that's actually opened up new doors. So we've actually been able to find new pathways for creating a viable opportunities as well. So there we go.
Chad?
I purposely wanted to go last on this one because we have a field of entrepreneurs and I spend most of my time in the investing world. But what I'll say is that this is the best time to be an investor, because ultimately the most important thing that you are evaluating when you are investing in a business is the people who are involved. And this is an environment that is riddled with risk and requires people to be versatile, and one in which if someone has decided to stick through it as an entrepreneur at this time and is surviving, they're probably one of the highest quality entrepreneurs that you can find. And so in a kind of paradoxical way, when things are worst, you find the best entrepreneurs. And just to frame you all's mind around how that passes out in reality is, think about the businesses that are the brand names of your generation. the Lyfts, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, etc. Those businesses were started, call it 10 years ago, when we were coming out of the financial crisis, because those were a bunch of people who were just in their living rooms, in their garages, figuring out how to put their dreams into the world at a time when nobody was buying anything. So as an investor, not an entrepreneur, COVID is, while challenging, a really good time for people who really want to be in it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, this has been probably one of the best periods for us, growth-wise, as Josh just said. As they have risk in the environment, then they create opportunities as well. And I got quite lucky. I'm not going to use talent and say that I'm smarter than anyone, but I got lucky because the cannabis industry saw growth and sales, and there's a big shift away from smokables towards edibles. So the entire sector got a lot of growth, and then my subsector got even more growth. Mm-hmm. So, we saw a lot of growth on that side. And then, this is where we took the opportunity to expand leverage our current assets and our distribution and basically hit the distribution game hard in Trinidad and Tobago, leverage our networks in Jamaica, took our IP for the vegan milk and then turned it into an ice cream. So during this time, I mean, a lot of more creation was done and more development was done. And I think this month will probably be better than any quarter I've ever had. And the next quarter is going to be better than any year I've ever had. So we're basically seeing, rapid growth. I think COVID has been helping, not really hurting. But as I said, I got lucky with one of the factors. Some of it was good decision making.
Yeah, interesting.
And like Chad on my advisory team, so
Very good. Yeah, the same factor. That's the same factor. Yeah. It's interesting to hear that the COVID, because I know most people would have expected to hear a lot of negatives about the impact of COVID on people's business, because that's all you're seeing really when you go around the country. So it's interesting to hear that there's been growth aspects and positive aspects with the opportunities presented, and you all have been embracing that. So that's great. I think we want to close off the questions, Brevard, and we can get the questions answered, as we said, on the portal.
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few additional questions, but folks, obviously, just given the time we will touch on some of them because we have some other questions that Mr. Balwant will be asking the panelists.
Yeah.
That haven't been covered will be responded to separately through your deans, etc.
Yeah. So those of you who've asked questions that you didn't hear response, we're going to let the panelists respond and put it up on the portals, and you can always check it in your respective deans portals to get the responses. Because we do want to go on to another aspect, which is more or less closing off, but we want to get to a final aspect of the panel discussion, and that is to ask each one of you all, what is your most memorable Saints story, referring to anything from a time in class to playing on the field or playing in the big yard or prefect's concert or sports day, something that will be very relevant to the attendees, those who are currently in college, and of course, interest them. So we can go around the panel. Anybody wants to start first? What is your most memorable Saints story that you took away?
Mine would have to be, I don't know if you all still have water bags in CIC, but we had a big water bag fight when I was in Form 1 or Form 2, where I have to say like at least 200 people from Form 4 to Form 6 and about the same from Form 1 to Form 3 were engaged in a water bag fight. And I have to say, representing the fellow Form 2s that were with me at that time, we won. People like Mr. Balwant were not happy, but those are the boy days I look back on and get very excited about. Is
great.
Kind of the David and Goliath story that we went through, fighting the older fellas like Chris Boodoosingh, etc.
Yeah,
mashing them up in back.
I don't remember y'all winning, bro. I just remember y'all just getting soaked.
Anybody else?
So you know, this is a, I'm not gonna, actually gonna give another example, not from school, but from 2 weeks ago. Because this is something I'm just so incredibly proud of. We have a group, a WhatsApp group from my class. There's about, I don't know, 40, 50 of us. And we just stay connected. We formed like a really strong bond. And, you know, every time, you know, I in Trinidad, you know, we gather, we've kept the bonds going. But, you know, during COVID, you know, some people were impacted. And, you know, we just decided, look, we will be a support group for each other. And folks have just been like contributing money financially and giving generously to help each other through. So we've just been like an extended family for each other. And I just want to like share that because your bonds that you're creating at CIC, you're creating lifeline. I mean, it's for life. It's not just once you leave CIC, it doesn't end, you know. And I've just been like really proud just to see that 30 plus years later. Oh gosh, I didn't leave that. I wasn't supposed to let that out. But several years later, that we are still ridiculously tight. We still talking the same old talk as though we were, you know, 15 years old. And we still, you know, supporting each other like we are family. So I just had to share that one.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that the people I met at St. Mary's have been some of the most influential people in my life to this date. My business partner and co-founders went St. Mary's. My best friend and best man went St. Mary's. You know, I have a lot of business interactions and suppliers that are, you know, former St. Mary's old boys as well. So I think the community is quite strong and we're very sharing and caring for each other, and we look out for each other, you know, in a different kind of capacity than we obviously care for each other as Trinidadians, but we care more about each other as brothers, you know, St. Mary's brothers, all of us, you know. So, you know, feel free to reach out to any of us, you know, myself, Chad, or Mark, you know, if any of you guys have questions as you'll go through the entrepreneurial or life roller coaster, and, you know, you all just want to reach out to an ex-entrepreneur and ask us how anything, you know, we're here for you.
Great. Yeah, that's great to hear. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, you know, echo what the other guy said. You know, my dad is class of 70, so they have their 50th. But would have had their 50th reunion this year. I mean, COVID and stuff notwithstanding, and I always laugh when he's relaying all the old talk and all the peacock that kind of they have in their group, right? Having left CIC years and years ago, I left 21 years ago myself, right? And yeah, it is always amazing running into a Saints man, whether you're in New York or in San Francisco or London or anywhere in between. So I think the community certainly has a ton of breadth and a ton of depth to it. And I think for those of you all, and I think, you know, you're hearing all of us sort of reference it with some degree of nostalgia because it's, in some ways, it's always easy to look back on these things and maybe appreciate them when you don't have them on a daily basis anymore, right? So certainly for everybody who's on the call, Form 3, Form 6, or otherwise, take a little bit of heed of some of these words that these fellas are sharing for sure. You know, I mean, favorite memories, I mean, honestly, I have tons, right? I love my time at CIC, not without its challenges like anybody else, but it was amazing. I would say putting on school colors to play sports, you know, certainly near the top of the list. I played basketball through under 20 for CIC. You know, we never used to get quite the same rise as first 11, but even so, right? Like, you know, you're traveling around Trinidad, you know, again, representing CIC, which is always incredible, especially the first couple of times when you got to put on that senior uniform and wear the old whites and blue and stuff. And then I think our year, we also started, I'm not sure if you all still do the CIC fashion show, but our year was the first year that I launched this. So this is 22 years ago or something when we were in Form 5. And I'm reflecting on that because obviously it was around CIC Bazaar and all that stuff, which is always a big time in the calendar for all the fellas when you're growing up and stuff. But it was also a really cool entrepreneurial endeavor amongst the prefects and amongst the folks in our class, like very short space of time, pulling something together, doing it creatively, you know, getting buy-in from some skeptics amongst our teachers and deans and principals, and ultimately having a pretty incredible show, right? And of course, everybody likes having all the convent girls cheering for you when you're walking up and down that runway. So that was definitely a great memory for many reasons that I think I still cherish today.
I remember that, Mark. I remember it's Contagious. It's called
Contagious, exactly.
Yeah.
Michelle Ayangshi.
Michelle Ayangshi. Yeah. That was the start. It went on for a few years, quite a few years. Yeah, it's no longer on. It evolved into many different formats to get
right. As it should.
Yeah. But that's great. That's a great memory for real. So I think that's about it.
Yeah, it seems like we may be able to like squeeze in just a couple more questions because people have been sending them in. You know, one question from Kathy Ann. She said, how does someone with not much money be able to finance ideas like what you guys have shared, especially to start and grow a business? She made a point that entrepreneurship sounds costly, but not has access to these large loans and large income. So I think you guys might be able to shed some light on what is really required to start businesses and maybe dispel some myths as well.
Well, here's one thing that I like to tell everybody, right? And this is, a lot of my friends have brought this to me. So the idea that, you know, it's hard to get money, right? Or let's just pick $1 million for a starting number, whatever currency you want to choose. The reality situation is you have a good idea and you think if you had $1 million, you could make $10 million, right? Well, theoretically speaking, if you had 100,000, you could make $1 million, right? If making $1 million, you can make 10. If you had 100, you could make $1 million even easier, right? And theoretically, if you had 10, you could make 100 even easier. Now, you might have to modify your business plan, or you might have to scale down, whatever the case is. The point is, there's probably a lower starting point than you think is what you need. And then the second thing is rallying your previous successes. Somebody from your previous history believes in you enough that they will invest in you, right? So you start small, you develop a reputation, and you leverage that reputation to attract more investors. And then, well, I reach the point where like banks are now begging me to possibly take loans from them, because the track record has reached the point where institutional will now talk to me. But at one point, no bank would have talked to me. I'll be honest with you, because I had no revenue. So the reality situation is, you know, you leverage what you do have, and what you do have might be a little bit of success, and that can get some investment and get a result with that investment, and you should be able to leverage that to get more. You know what I mean? And that's what I would advise to someone that doesn't have the capital. You know.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say as quickly and as inexpensively as you can, get to something in market and prove your product, prove the viability of your product. And there's a whole bunch of lean innovation frameworks, tools out there. But, you know, and depending on, you know, there's so many industries. So I'm not sure exactly what type of, path this question was leading towards, but from a technology perspective, I mean, just get something provable. I don't look at ideas. I'm looking for something that's in market that has proven itself. And that's at least my starting point for having a conversation, you know, for Innovation Labs. So it is really get to that point of market proof, market validation, and that then becomes easier. It's really tough to kind of cross that chasm from idea to actually get into market. So as effectively, as efficiently as you can, try to get to that proof of concept.
Yeah, get to that MVP, minimum viable product, and get that out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Stuff.
Brevard, I think we could take the question on Spanish.
Sure.
Yeah. There's a question from Mr. Weeks, Spanish teacher in the college. How important will you say having a second language is in pursuing a career in business? Any takers?
I wish I learned Spanish, but.
Yeah, I mean, I took Spanish for CIC. I was not to CIC, but whole level CXC. And, you know, when I look at my New Year's resolutions, every year for the last 10 years, it's been relearn Spanish, right? So, so one of these years I'll get to it, I promise. I think it can only help. Not only because, you know, the world that we live in today has become progressively more global. I have a twin sister. So she was a convent girl. She has 2 little kids, 5 and 3. They both speak Chinese. She's always been a big lover of language, her and her husband. And so she believes in, you know, they have a Spanish nanny and they learn Chinese and they're kind of investing in the multiple language thing. I mean, the reality is, yeah, you know, it opens up your options or your alternatives. You decide you want to go work in Europe or, you know, if you believe in the emergence of China as the next global superpower, that might be different 15 years from now, by the way. So always hard to place those bets. But I think it certainly can aid you. And again, just as we were kind of talking about earlier on with regards to sort of like where you start is not necessarily where you finish, right? And so there is value in exposing yourself to whether it's another language, another culture, all of those things. I think you do see benefit that accrues to them. So I would say go for it if you can certainly add it to the roster.
Sure.
So I'd say 2 things. You know, just want to echo that. You know, to become more of a global economy, any additional language skills will help. But I just have to put in the plug as the AARP guy. You know, learning any additional language is one of the greatest things you can do for brain health, especially as we are living a longer life. It can help in reducing the chance of getting dementia later on in life. So, you know, my 2 kids, they're both learning Spanish. I mean, and I'm purposely making sure that they're doing that because of what I've learned about reducing dementia. So the thing is the stuff that you're learning. So there's the functional and then there's the other benefits. So like the calculus you learn in school, it's helping you with critical thinking. The piano and the arts is helping the right side of your brain, you know, from a creativity perspective. So there's all of these benefits to your cognitive abilities when you learn different things that ultimately help you not just, you know, throughout life, but once you get later on in life. So I just have to say that, you know, the more languages you learn, it's gonna really pay off once you hit that 60, 70, 80 year mark.
Great to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we have another question from Jeremy, asking, how did you motivate yourselves to get to where you are today? And I'd also probably add, how do you continue to motivate yourself going forward?
Well, I mean, I don't know who wants to answer that question. I'll answer it. How did I motivate myself? Honestly, a combination of self-motivation. I think certainly a lot of motivation from those around me, to be honest, right? I am lucky to have 2 exceptional parents who've been super caring from the day that me and my sister were born. I think they just invested an incredible amount in us. So I think anything any success I've had is to their credit. Any failure I've had is probably my fault, to be candid. You know, on a personal level, I've always been hungry to do and to build and to create, right? I think even back in CIC days, I had pretty big dreams. And I think one thing that I've always said is growing up in a place like Trinidad actually affords a luxury that I think we don't always fully acknowledge. And I kind of describe it as this effect of sort of looking up at the world, right? Like, you know, when I was in Trinidad and CIC in the 90s and you come home and maybe, you know, you're looking at CNN or you're looking at cable or something in the US or BBC, you can develop some perspective on what's happening in the broader world around you, in addition to having an understanding, of course, of like the everyday culture that you are a part of, right? And I think it creates a level of resourcefulness in us. I think it emboldens a certain amount of creativity in us that I think we sometimes take for granted. Trinis see a lot, and we actually end up having our hands in a lot of things. And I think once you begin to reframe that as a positive and as an opportunity and as a catalyst to really kind of do more, I think it just kind of unlocks a different level of ambition in you, you know? And, you know, even when I tell the story about 10 to 1 right now, when I graduated from business school, I finished Harvard in 2010. I actually remember being a little bit jealous of some of my classmates at the time. Some of my classmates who were from some of these bigger emerging markets. They're from like the BRIC countries. So they're going back to Turkey or Brazil or Hong Kong, and they have these big markets and big opportunities to go create stuff. And I would say to myself, well, yeah, you know, like, I wish I could do something related to Trinidad, but, you know, we're only 1.2, 1.3 million people. Like it doesn't feel like it can have the same impact at the same scale. And the more that I have thought about it, the more time I've spent in this world, the more wrong I realize I was, right? 10 to 1 as a brand, even though it's headquartered in New York, is telling the story of the Caribbean. It's telling the story of Trinidad. It's sharing what we have on a global scale. And so I think you can find ways to bring, right, like your own local experience and your own specific attributes and really make that ambition as big and as broad as you want to be, right? You'll be able to find a stage for them. So I think it's those types of things, that kind of reflection that has certainly kept me motivated, and I think continuously striving to build and to do more.
Okay, and if nobody else want to jump in there.
I could jump in. Let me just say, I would say like, it's changed for me. I would say like for half of my life, there was an intimidation factor, right? I'd say like given my background, I've always had this like, why the hell am I here? How the hell did I make it here? Like, you know, just, you know, I remember getting to Howard, and there were all of these like, I was young, and there were folks from CIC who were like 4 or 5 years older than me, who were like the popular kids, right? And it was like, and I was like this youth from George Street. I was like, how am I here? And it was always like trying to earn my place, different places, right? I remember getting to Stanford and thinking like, how did I make it here? And it was like, I was like the youngest at Stanford in age and in experience. And it was like always like trying to like figure out how am I earning my right to be in certain places. And so it was always that intimidation factor. And then when I had my kids, it kind of flipped. And then suddenly I was motivated by how can I, you know, kind of do this for my family. So suddenly there was like a different motivation factor to just kind of be the best that I can be from a dad perspective. And I guess, you know, as I shared before, as time has progressed, you know, I'm kind of, I wouldn't call it like an arrogance, but it's like, I'm now starting to think about the impact on the world and how can I leverage my skills, capabilities, and so forth to have an impact in Trinidad, have an impact in the United States, you know. So I'm doing things with my time. I'm being very purposeful with my time so that I can influence change, that I can influence lives. I want to make sure that when I'm on my deathbed, whenever that is, that I can give myself an E, that I can say, look, you know, I've had some impact in not just in my family, but in my communities, in my country. And that's what's keeping me going right now. And that's my motivating factor, but it's definitely evolved over the years.
Yeah, I'd follow that and say, I've had a very similar experience to Mark in terms of kind of cycles of motivation. I've had really incredible parents who opened my eyes to possibility and pushed me to kind of come to learn the joy of figuring things out on my own. And then went through the cycle of being in a place where I was surrounded by others, so I felt like I had a better opportunity to go impress what they were learning on the places they came from. I'd say today, the most constant and recurring source of inspiration for me is honestly in talking to other people and recognizing one of two things: how much I don't know, and then two, how exciting the learning process is. So to give you a little bit of an example of that, sitting down in a room with Mark, Nigel, or Chris, I imagine that each of them can give me a little bit of a window into their world, and I walk out of an hour-long conversation feeling like I just learned a ton, and both recognizing that there's still so much to go learn, and seeing how how exciting that learning process is for them just keeps me wanting to absorb more.
Okay. And I guess one last question, just looking at our time. We have a question. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give your 16-year-old self?
I would really ask myself, why am I pursuing this? You know, like look into the why. You know, I mean, that's the advice. That's the advice I would give myself. You know, and then the why is going to then give you a lot more insight as to what decisions you should be making. You know, why are you deciding to go after tech? Why are you deciding to go after this type of knowledge and skill set? You want to go to school in Canada, you want to go to school in England, you want to stay in Trinidad. The why is more important. Are you pursuing a certain path, you know? And that kind of will help you identify, you know, just a little bit more information about yourself, and it's going to be different for each of us.
And I'd complement that with a why not. So after you've asked yourself why and you get really confident that this is the thing you want to pursue, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, I couldn't do it because of these reasons. You know, my parents told me I can't do it for this reason. My friends told me I couldn't do it for this reason. Ask yourself, why not? Like, one kind of piggybacking on what you said, Nigel, about intimidation factor, that stops people from doing so many things that they can and should do. If you want to talk to a CEO or the president or somebody who you feel like is very well tooled to do it, they're probably going to want to talk to you. And in fact, this is probably the best time to be asking them questions, because people love helping people who are younger than them and on a path trying to learn and get up to speed on whatever topic you care most about. So remember the why, and also remember the why not.
Yeah, I think 16 was that age I was going through that intimidation phase. So I would just tell myself exactly that. Don't be intimidated. You deserve to be here. Just go forth and just be confident.
Let me give you a perfect example of that why, right? When I was 16 years old, I thought I wanted to be the richest man, right? But then when I asked myself why, and the answer to that was because I wanted to be happy, right? And I realized I didn't need to be rich to be happy. You understand? When I asked myself the why, I discovered more about the pursuit. And now, you know, as we got older, we got more mature, my frame is different than my frame was when I was 21. And I started my entrepreneurial, you know, quest. So, and I would say I am a genuinely happier person now that I have more self-discovery and I've learned. So yeah, that is probably one of the most profound things that I've done, self-reflecting things that I've done over the years, you know, identify that why.
Yeah, you know, if I love all those responses. If I had to give advice to my 16-year-old self, I would write a book, because I have a lot of things I want to go back in time and some wisdom I could impart on my younger self, right? But probably the two biggest things I would say would be, one, you know, seize the opportunity. And we always say all the cliches, school days is the best days and this and that, you know, you have your youth and all of those things. But it's true, and not because you don't get any do-overs in life, right? You can always learn, you can always evolve, you can always change. But each of those moments is an opportunity to learn, to experience, to try something new, you know? And so savor those moments that you have in school around this time with the people you're surrounded with, the teachers you have the luxury of being taught by, and really make sure you seize all of those opportunities, make the most of them. And I think actually the second thing I would say to my 16-year-old self is I would say to him, don't worry, because actually out there, everybody is trying to figure it out still. You know, you have this view when you're younger that like there's some old wise sage out there or some famous CEO or whoever who somehow seems like they have it figured out. Yo, let me just tell everybody who's listening right now, everybody is out there trying to figure it out. And so like, again, don't get too stressed about like making a mistake or making a wrong turn along the way, right? Because we're all on life's journey. I think as many people have said on this panel, the way in which you sort of embrace those opportunities and react to those changes and channel those disappointments is what ultimately becomes the hallmark of success.
Thank you very much. I think that summarizes exactly the message that we were hoping that would go out to the students of the participants who are in the field of selecting subjects. So I think Mark, you hit the nail on the head there with what we would like them to take away amidst all the other great responses that you all put out there. We want to wrap up now. So I'd like to thank the panelists today, Nigel, Chad, Mark, and Chris, for your great insightful inputs that I feel can make a difference in some of these boys. It's not just in selecting subjects, as we were saying, it's in making them the saints man and the man that we know that they can go on to be. Thank you for making today's session so inspiring to all our young men and the parents who are on. It was a pleasure serving. To the principal, Mr. Nigel Joseph, for his support and blessing for this venture. Thank you very much. To the St. Mary's College Past Students Union and its president, Mr. Brevard Nelson, who spearheaded this entire venture and himself, a dynamic entrepreneur, could have been one of the panelists. He could have fit into one of these panelists perfectly today. Thank you very much, Brevard. To the St. Mary's College Parent Support Group, which, I don't know if you know it exists, under the chair of Ms. Shelley Prasad and her team, who helped coordinate along with Brevard this entire venture. To the Dean of Form 3 for support in terms of disseminating all the information to the students, and then all the other deans who disseminated the information to the rest of the school. To you, the attendees, the participants, for joining us. Thank you for sharing these last 2 hours with us. We do hope that you have learned a lot, and we do hope that you join us in the upcoming sessions tomorrow for science and technology, on Friday for sports and entertainment. We have equally impressive speakers on those days, and we hope that you do join us for those sessions. Thank you very much, everyone. Do stay safe and keep in touch and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Pleasure, guys. Talk soon. Take care.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.